It's this time of the morning that we say a very good morning to Mr. Nico Kleynhans. Thank you for coming through to our studio, sir.
Good morning to you and to listeners.
So a lot of schools and a lot of parents, most importantly, are looking at education costs and trying to figure out how are we going to do this going forward, not only from primary school to high school, but from high school to tertiary. Tertiary. And with regard to that, that's why we need you to unpack this for us, please.
Yeah, I chose this particular story because it's one of the more complex ones that we had to deal with. And I really want parents to understand the need to plan ahead. That's really why I chose this. In this particular case, the client has got 3 children. They are 5, 9, and 10 years old. They live in a rural area, so they're not in a city, and therefore they don't necessarily have the choice of schools that you have in the city. And which means that you've got to look at boarding schools as well. So the cost structure is very different. Now, to attend primary schools in that particular area, she's looking at 12,000 rand per month for her 3 kids. And by the time they get to high school, she's going to be looking at 75,000 rand per month for those 3 kids.
Yeah.
And her problem is, how much money must she have saved to provide for that education? That's the first question. And the second question is, if something happens to her health and she cannot work anymore, how much money is she going to have saved up through insurance? Because that's what insurance is supposed to do. It replaces other sources of income if she can't work to provide that. And the third question is, should she pass away before the last child reaches the end of university term, what kind of life cover would needed to have been put in place? And what form of trust fund would need to be created? So it's a whole lot of issues that would be much more complicated than an ordinary person would be able to put together. And she needed to get the figures. Now, we use AI technology so that it means that if I put a calculation together, it takes a couple of seconds to do the calculation. And then if the client then says, oh, but what if? I don't have to go and jump off the roof to recalculate everything. It's one figure that I have to change and everything comes together. In addition to that, we've got to take inflation into account. So I've got to project inflation for up to 15, 20 years. And I've got to be able to look at the long-term inflation rate. And then I've got to make an assessment, is that realistic going forward? And if not, how do we work that? So it's a fairly complicated scenario calculations that we have to do. In addition to that, there are other issues because it's 3 kids and they, from where they are, I asked about the kids. Are they showing any kind of special gifts around sport or drama or anything like that? Because we know that today what a lot of schools provide, especially high-end schools, is they provide the dreaded overseas trip.
Oh, yes.
Where you're looking at 40 or 50,000 rand for that 2-3 week journey away. And yes, it does provide. And so we've put that in place as well. So there was a whole lot of scenarios that we had to deal with. Now, the difference is it's not just a matter of selling her a package off the shelf. That's not what is needed here. It's a matter of getting her to understand the strategy that we're putting in place. It's a matter of getting her to understand why we're putting it in place and what reviews have to happen more than once a year so that we can keep tweaking the figures. Now, in this particular case, we found that the shortfall in her case would be a couple of million rand that would need to be achieved. And the will has got to be written in a very special way because that trust fund has got to provide for the kids who are of different ages. I mean, the age difference between the youngest and the oldest is 5 years. So the trust fund has got to terminate as each child reaches the end of their university, because you don't want the situation where the child inherits money at the age of 18 and then goes and buys a helicopter instead of
Exactly, yeah.
finishing the university training, because that, believe it or not, has happened. So there are a whole lot of factors. So the whole idea of financial planning is you're sketching a number of scenarios. Then you've got to re-plan your estate around those goal settings. And for that, you need help. It's much more complicated doing it today than it was 20 years ago, than it was 30 years ago. It also means you've got to keep thinking how your child is changing, because a 5-year-old child, you will have one picture. When that child gets to 12, you will have a different picture. By the time they get to high school, you will know, okay, this is not going to be an author who's going to produce English drama, that's going to win a Booker Prize. This particular child's going to go in a different direction. So all of that just deals with education. It doesn't even deal with the family debt. It doesn't even deal with the other challenges. So I want to encourage parents right now. If you've taken the responsibility of having children, you need to make sure that you've put plans in place that protects the child. Far too many people, and I've been in this business, for more than 30 years now, people tend to wake up when they get to 45, and they wake up when they're worried about retirement. And that's too late to now start planning. You've got to start planning literally the day the child is born, so that you get everything in place. But the technology is there, the software is there, and one can work and get some kind of control over finances and have peace of mind. But with the inflation we're dealing with today, you're going to be surprised by the kind of needs that you have to provide for and protect yourself against.
Sure. And I mean, it's specific in the education sphere that we're saying that inflation is very high, right?
Yes, inflation for food, for instance, is about a third of what the education is.
Okay.
The CPI index is for education. Yes, it's very, very different.
Yeah. Well, Nico, always great to chat to you. Thank you for giving us a shot of reality and for just highlighting this very important topic. Ladies and gents, if you are married and you're planning to have kids, start now planning with regard to that. And then also set yourself short-term goals as well as long-term goals. Nico, thank you very much. We appreciate